So this here is my birth certificate that was issued shortly after I was born, and it would reflect your name, your surname, your date of birth, your gender, where you were born, and also your race. This here is my late father's death certificate. So even in death, the person is classified. Yeah? He was Cape-coloured. We're always identified in terms of our race and never free of that. This only fell away in 1994.
Apartheid leswaku a hi hanye eku hlupheka etikweni leri a va hi xanisa ngopfu emabunu milawu ya ku yi tika hinkwayo ka yona a ku nga ri na nawu wo antswa.
Apartheid was a political system in South Africa where the ruling party, which was white but Afrikaans speaking, they designed a system in such a way that they could control people. Not only fellow white people, but all of the population.
It was a legislated form of racial discrimination. It was a separation of the races unique to South Africa, and that it was legislated and debated upon in Parliament.
And when I came to this country, I was forbidden to actually have African friends or have any kind of interaction on a friendly level with an African person, and this was very difficult for me because I didn't understand it. I was indoctrinated with a fear because that's what they do with us as children in South Africa. They made us really fear black people. They said that they were dangerous and they would kill you or they would rob you or they would do something bad to you. So these are not good people. You mustn't interact with them and you must be fearful of them. And this is why these laws are in place, is to keep us safe from these savages.
Apartheid came into being formally in 1948 when the nationalist government came into power. And so that's when they became, or worked out a really big plan to kind of enforce apartheid. Remember, this was after the Second World War as well, and the kind of influences of Hitler in terms of this idea that white people are superior or better than black people. So that's the similarity that South Africa has or had with Nazi Germany.
people were scared. You know, you're scared of what they call the swart gevaar, the black danger, that they were just going to take over and everybody was going to be swamped. So yes, there was a lot of belief in the apartheid system.
Apartheid was a very complex social engineering campaign, but it also dehumanized people, because its essence was saying that white people are superior, important, and therefore should get all of the resources, and black people, their only real future is to do manual labor.
I've spoken to an Afrikaner in the north of South Africa who really believed that an African person did not have a soul, that he was an animal, and therefore he was here to serve the white man, and it comes out of the Bible. So you can whip them with a whip because they are animal, they are here to work for you. So this is very dangerous philosophies, and they are upheld by law.
So it was a system, it wasn't a person. The difference between that and Germany, whereas if you're looking at Nazism, you have Hitler as the face of, whereas for us, there were Nazis, South African Nazis, but yeah, apartheid was a system of controlling people. So they divided people into various groups based on language, based on culture, and based on race.
The main classifications were white, African, or black, Indian, and colored. And then there used to be a thing called other, which would, I suppose, include Chinese, for example.
There were times that they did reclassify people. They would do the pencil test. So they would take a pencil and put it in the back of the hair here. If it fell out, it meant that the person's hair was straight enough, like a white person's hair. Then they would look at skin color. Could you be within the range of how white people look? Then they looked at eye color, and then the last thing is they look at the shape of your nose. So you could meet all of the other criteria, but if you had a nose the shape like mine, not going to be reclassified. Every year, the relevant minister would tell Parliament how many people got reclassified. And others became Zulu, and whites became coloureds, and it's crazy when you look at the statistic. What is this?
The division. So apartheid was to rule us in a divided society. They were also going further and subdivide us into culturally. If you are a Zulu, you will stay in an area with the Zulus only. And if you are a Xhosa, you will be staying in an area only the Xhosas and the Sothos and so on. So we carry on with our trip of seeing the different areas of the Zuma. This is the township was built in 1975 and it's divided by sections. Section F, Section B. So most of our townships are divided into sections. They used to have a tin house made out of shacks, made out of mud. There were no formalized structures.
So all of our existence was permeated, was influenced by this notion of race. Who you can love, who you can marry, who your neighbors will be. Because as we've been spending the time together, it would have been very hard in 1989, 1990. Not possible. Just not possible.
The love relationship was very difficult during the apartheid era. There was a security police. They would come in and harass people. They would break into people's home and feel that the bed sheet is still warm. They would take photographs, they look for evidence, and then they take you to court and prosecute you. It affected me personally because the woman that I fell in love with was a woman of another race. She was an Indian South African. And in the old apartheid days, we were oppressed by the Mixed Marriages Act and the Immorality Act, which forbade sexual relations and marriage between people of different races. I had my car tires punctured once when I went to visit in a secret location to be with my wife so we could spend some time together in a safe house and we could love each other. When I came back to my car, the car was punctured with a piece of plank with nails sticking in it. That was obviously security police. I was arrested and taken off to the police station and told I must change my ways. I received death threats in the post, shells, bullet shells. This is what we went through.
We born and brought up in the apartheid country. Therefore, we did not know any other way of living except living within the apartheid. We knew where we belonged, and also we were aware where you are allowed to go and where we were not allowed to go.
So you see at the level of the mind how apartheid works. You're not good enough to be elevated to anything. And where your boxes, where your residential areas, which schools you go to, what kinds of sport you play, which beaches you go to, what social activities you can or can't do, when you can and or can't do those things.
Everything was suppressed in apartheid time. South Africa was a country of 1,000 Berlin walls.
There used to be segregation parks, segregation transport, restaurant, place of work. There were different toilets. Besides male and female, there were white toilets and there were black toilets. You were not even involved to go shoulder to shoulder with them. So when you're going in the same direction, you must open up a space, let them go freely as they wish. Sometimes they may even hit you with their shoulder. You must be the one to apologize.
Apartheid was untruthful, it was a lie. It was a lie to the people of South Africa and to the people of the world.
These are the people who have built South Africa into a modern industrial giant. South Africans of all colors and creeds, sharing the rewards of a free enterprise economy.
The role of the mass media in the apartheid area would depend on which facet of the media it was. Because of apartheid, there was different facets of the media. There was the black press, the English press, and the Afrikaans press. Remember, we only had television in 1976. So there was apartheid before that. The television, on the other hand, it was state-run, and that will tell you everything.
The media at the time was heavily censored. There was the Internal Security Act at the time, which, I mean, you could be thrown into jail without having a formal hearing. Detention without trial was what it was called, for using the ANC's name in your publication, for mentioning anything about a banned organization or a banned individual. So it was intense, and there was a huge clampdown on information.
The English speaking was the most liberal. They were like a bit of a conscientiousizing the population, especially the English population, as to, you know, the injustices of apartheid, whereas the Afrikaans press was with the government of the day in all the ways, and there was very little opposition. In fact, there was support for the apartheid regime from the Afrikaans press. But the English language newspapers were more liberal and criticizing continually as far as they could, because they themselves were censored and were subject to restrictions and penalties, etc.
E platform yiri yin'we a ku ri ni a hi nga fiki ka platform leyi nge ku tshama ku yime valungu koho he a hi yime ka platform ya he a ku ri ti-subway leti nge ti ri koho loko wo tshika i ya nghena kwala subway a va ku ba or va ka endla leswi va swi lavaka hi wehe a hi huma ntsena a hi swi tepise a hi nga ngheni eka subway leti nge ti ri koho.
It was a very painful day for me, because I realized that day how much hatred there was. And it was a very simple incident. I was walking along the road with my little girl, and there were some swings for the children to play. And so I decided I was going to take my little girl and put her on the swing. And an African woman with her child came walking. And it was whites only, big signs, whites. The parks were for the white children only. And this mother looked around, and she decided it was safe to put her little girl on the swing and to swing her. A man in his car who was driving past, an Afrikaans man, stopped his car, got out of their car, ran over, slapped the little girl across the face, pushed her off the swing, and screamed at the mother, swore at her, and walked off, got into his car and drove away. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I ran to this woman, I picked her up, and I picked up her child, and I said, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Now, when the hatred like that has to come out on innocent children on a swing, this is very deep, and it is insanity.
Every city in South Africa has got at least one township. The oldest and the biggest obviously is Soweto. And the word Soweto stands for the S-O, South, W-E, Western, T-O, townships. So if you look at the map of Johannesburg, you will see that Soweto is in the southwest of Johannesburg. And that's how it got its name.
We are in Orlando West. I always think that this is the capital city of Soweto. is a historical place in the fight against apartheid. Every corner, every street has a story to tell. Here we are. It's a very important place for me. We are here at the Hector Peterson Museum. This is the site that is dedicated to the students of 1976. On June 16, when the students of Soweto came out in protest against apartheid. Because of the Afrikaans government that was in power, it wanted people to start studying Afrikaans. So they felt that once they could accept Afrikaans as a language in schools, it's more like accepting apartheid. So the school students went out against the introduction of Afrikaans. Unfortunately, police retaliated by shooting at the students.
Here we have the classic part of a Langa crowd, Langa, we're one of the black townships. A large crowd of students and adults which gathered near the Langa police station today. "28th of November 1976, policemen chases demonstrator as black youths were dispersed. In the beginning, smiles and salute, then come the madness.
Loko va adopta abantu education ku kumeka sa ku ana ka organization ya ANC ya ku lwisa apartheid. Se ya exikolweni ya humese vana etitlilasini leswaku va nga ngheni exikolo a va boycott hikuva a hi lavi Bantu education. Se va ta yi khoma kwala va ya yi pfalela.
This is police in camouflage uniform looked down on an injured man in Alexandra Township on Friday. Indian shops blazed during the terror in 1976. This mother here actually grieves for her child, agony of a Sowetan woman. Her child died during the riots.
Richard Hirso. Se ni me lo così ni nyamba. Ma na ritwa ku rubatske Richard Hirso. Ako ekesni Richard. Heme Lawrence. Lo kabula se ang package packet. Ang package packet lo kang package sunglan shambere. No mana me sen ribalan so ku bun kan khoma tembe. Na me package packet ka inu na unga bengwa na me ngela e Richard man. Se atshika Lawrence iman langu ta chikuta ekunipa. Lawrence upon se sembiliane ga. Yiva wenzani futhi sesako nani ungendla ine posisalera akuna lexi nga endla ku xona hikuva loko ku ri maphorisa a va nghena va endla xin'wana lexi va xi lavaka endlwini a ku nga ri na nandzu.
I wasn't allowed to have a passport for many years. So I had an identity document, but I wasn't allowed to travel. So it was very difficult to leave legally And that's also why so many young black people literally just walked over the borders of South Africa into neighboring countries. They didn't have another option.
Eventually, I said to my wife and my two small children, well, they didn't even understand at the time really, but I said to my wife, I have to leave. And I went into self-imposed exile into Australia for 5.5 years. And we weren't married at the time. We couldn't get married, it was illegal. And I said, I'm not going to go to another country to get married and then come back into South Africa. I want to see this thing through to the bitter end. That is my struggle, and I want to get married here. I don't want to have to go to another country. Why must I leave my other country, my country, where I've been here for generations, my family's been here, to go to another country, make married, but in secret, and come back here? I wanted to be open. So I went into self-imposed exile into Australia for 5.5 years.
Apartheid for me, it divided me from my parents. I grew up without parents, and also it made me live in many places because of the parents are not there. You live with granny, you live with uncle, you live with auntie. So apartheid, it made me to grow up very fast. It made me to focus on things that I was not supposed to focus on in that age. I became active. I was a member of a youth organization fighting against a system. I've seen Soweto lose its innocence. I've seen this place in smoke. When human life for a minute did not mean anything. I've seen that together you can stand as a community or as a society, and divided you can fall.
And I don't want to do it ANC. I have a meeting, I found a meeting, letting the cargo. He don't see what no come what this funny leg, so.
It was very intense and very effective in many ways. You know, there were obviously the banned organizations like the ANC, the PAC, etc. And then to counter that, what the ANC had done was set up structures which were operating legally, if you want to call it that there. So within the country itself, there were a lot of activity. There was, for example, the UDF, the United Democratic Front, which towards the end of the 80s joined forces with a whole lot of other anti-apartheid movements, like the Natal Indian Congress and sports bodies, etc., to form what was then called the Mass Democratic Movement, which was huge and very effective in countering apartheid from within.
During the time of the apartheid, the people that supported apartheid, it was not all whites, but they were very minority who did not support apartheid.
Because I wasn't a very political person, I didn't really have many conversations to people about these things. But obviously everyone supported it because no one opposed it.
I think a lot of people, a lot of white people in particular, supported apartheid in the sense that they didn't object to it. It suited you. There was a job reservation for white people, for example.
White people maybe didn't think about apartheid. They just lived their lives. They didn't kind of wake up and think, gosh, how is it possible that so many people don't have what I have? And how can anybody justify that morally?
Yeah, but yeah, everyone I knew didn't oppose apartheid. not one person. I don't know anyone who rallied against it or wanted it to end or anything. Everybody just went along with it because that's what was going on, you know. Yeah.
It was a terrible thing in many ways. As I said, for some of us growing up in those times, it was an exciting time because you resisted it and you had to fight against all of these things. It was I didn't think, as a student growing up, I did not think that apartheid would end in my lifetime. I thought apartheid would just continue and continue, and the struggle against it would continue and continue.
There are many people who feel that the reaction of the government to our stay at home, ordering a general mobilization, arming the white community, arresting 10,000s of Africans, the show of force throughout the country, notwithstanding our clear declaration that this campaign is being run on peaceful and non-violent lines, close the chapter as far as our methods of political struggle are concerned.
Nelson Mandela is our hero.
He was our first democratically elected president.
He was arrested during the Rivonia trialist in 1960.
He was locked away for almost 30 years on Robben Island, and he became a symbol.
Got a couple of photographs here. One of the things that we did when working at Robben Island was to smuggle in film and cameras and ask the political prisoners to take pictures. So there are two of them in prison uniform in the grounds of the prison. And in the background you can see Table Mountain. This is part of the very famous lime quarry, which Nelson Mandela was also sent to work. So these men had to chop this cave into the earth.
And he developed an idea of non-violent change.
After the ANC was unbanned and Mandela was released, he represented the complete reasonable face of the revolution, of the resistance to apartheid. There was no vindictiveness, there was no anger really. He just looked forward and looked positively.
The fact that he'd been in isolation for almost 30 years probably didn't make him all that much useful as a politician, but as a symbol it was tremendous.
Mandela é murhumi wa Xikwembu. Xikwembu xi rhumele yena leswaku a ta hi ntlhuntlha hina vanhu va South Africa.
A freedom fighter for us. He's a man of peace. He's a man of so much integrity, of so much honesty, of so much character, of so much love, of so much hope.
You know, people believed in something for a change. They believed that he could change things. They believed that he was honest. They believed that he was a good leader. Whether he was a good leader doesn't matter.
His braveness is where he put us today, because what people were looking at, or what we were thinking at as well, let's take up the guns and fight. But he have amazed us in terms of saying, let us forgive for those who've done bad.
A man who presented himself as with a belief in the country, with a belief in the future, with a belief of everybody here. It amazed me.
He represents that which we all deeply want, and that is peace.
We have waited too long for our freedom. We can no longer wait.
The elections of 1994, it was the greatest time in our lives.
Every black person and most even the white people as well, they have voted for ANC. It was not a vote of saying they're joining the ANC. It was a vote to say, Mandela, for the time you sacrifice and for the time you suffer, there's my vote for you. And that's what have happened.
I think this country showed the world that it can be done. It's the first case in history of a minority who was in charge handing it over voluntarily to a majority. That's certainly the case, and that's what happened here. So the politicians were fairly brave men who took that step too. You know, people could see it had to come to an end sometime. And we could have either had a civil war, or they could hand it over and hope that there was a future for all of us. And I think the white politicians who took that decision were fairly brave, because at that point they could have carried on for another 10, 20 years. You know, we could be in the middle of a war now. And that didn't happen because they made the right decision.
We had a very peaceful transition. 94 was very dignified.
As African people, where we felt that today we have an opportunity to vote. I was not unsure of who I wanted to vote for. I knew who I wanted to vote for, and I was one of the first people in the morning to go and cast that vote. It was one of the historical events in our lives, and it was breathtaking to see that opportunity comes to say, wow, this is what we fought for, and now we can witness.
So these are political prisoners that had just been released at their press conference. This was one of the first photographs that was taken of Tokyo Sexwale as a freed man. He's now our Minister of Human Settlements. Here we have some pictures of one of the oldest political prisoners on Robben Island, Old Man Pahla. This is very touching because it captures his first meal in freedom. And he had to learn again to eat with a knife and a fork. And he battled a bit before he got the hang of eating with a knife and a fork again.
I am exhilarated with the freedom that we have now compared to before. I'm not saying things are perfect today. Sure, our country is struggling with things like corruption, poverty, but I'm proud to say we can go anywhere. My wife and I can walk anywhere. People don't turn around and look at us or offer comments or swear. I'm not threatened anymore with arrest by the police for loving a woman of my choice.
Yes, the changes are huge in the sense that, as I was saying, I'm able to live in an area where I previously couldn't. My children can go to school in an area they previously couldn't as well.
The first changes that I can see is the employment.
Much more black people are now actively in the workplace than ever before. And companies are now also obliged to create opportunities and create pathways for black people so that more people are in the system.
There are more housing that have been built for people. There will never used to be that much water and electricity in the most areas. So you are really seeing the difference, and where roads were not tarred, so now we got roads.
So yes, there's been tremendous change. The fact that people are able to cast their vote and vote for whoever they want to, is obviously the biggest change. You know, apartheid wasn't just about a big racial divide, it was also about a big economic divide. So until you bridge that economic gap, people are still going to live in different, like in any society, the rich will stick together and the poor. Do you know what I mean?
When the black government took over, they formalized it even more and just started developing houses for the poor. So the wealthier black people moved into the towns where they could now buy property. So you've now got a black neighbor who in many respects probably has more money in the bank than you do. But the wealthier people have all moved into the towns, which is normal. The poorer people live in the townships. So the economic divide is really that most people in the townships are poor. I think in most people's cases, very little changed in terms of work. You either had the education or you didn't. If you didn't have the education, it wasn't going to give you the job in any case. So a lot of black people, I think, had very high expectations of the sort of job they would get once they had a black government. And that didn't come up because they weren't qualified.
The average black person still lives in a township, still has to take public transport, appalling public transport to work, still has to send their kids to schools which are of inferior quality and standard, still goes to a state hospital. Do you know what I'm saying? So that has not changed much.
A lot of people hoped that their children could do better. Whereas under the previous system, there was very little chance that they would be any different to mom and dad. You know, if mom and dad were labourers, that was it. At least now there's some hope that they might be able to be better. The chances are they won't, but there's the hope that they can be. Never forget that in this country has got the most developed economy in Africa. And that's as a result of the white man. There's a big enough white population that were educated that could do it. But there isn't a big enough population to keep it going. We've got to educate everybody in this country to keep it going and to get it developing. So even among a lot of the Afrikaans-speaking young people, they all realized there was no future to the system.
I suppose also for white South Africans, there was no longer any need to live under the guilt of what had happened before, because you were part of it because of your color or your class position. The fact that you were young and you hadn't made any choices yourself at that point wasn't really relevant.
So now, after, in post-apartheid South Africa, a lot of them feel as if something has been taken away from them. And I think that's only because they never thought that what they had maybe should have been shared in the first place.
There's a lot to be ashamed of and a lot to be sorry for. And it's too late. The only thing we can do is hope that it gets better in the future. But there is a lot to be proud about. And on top of everything else, it's a beautiful country, and I think at the end of the day, it's going to show the world that it can work.
At school level, and it's just wonderful to see kids all play along happily together, which is an experience we never had. But as they grow older, they still then tend to move into their different lagers, as in their little compartments. And I think that's because parents haven't yet mingled, they haven't yet opened their doors. And it's not because of an individual reluctance, I think it's because our society has not allowed us to do that.
Our inner being has been affected, and very profoundly. And so, you're seeing all kinds of really bad antisocial stuff going on in post-apartheid South Africa, and we're not really connecting it well enough to our apartheid experience and saying, I am like I am now and I'm conducting myself in this way, but the seeds of today's behavior lay somewhere else, and I need to look at that and I need to heal that so that I can heal now.
Apartheid doesn't continue. Apartheid was buried in 1994. That was the end of apartheid. If the apartheid was still continuous, we wouldn't be here.
You're always going to have poor people and rich people in any society, I think, But the fact that there's still a huge discrepancy in the number of poor people versus the number of people who are well off, is a problem. And in that sense, apartheid is very much alive.
We think in the very categories that the apartheid government wanted us to think in. They succeeded. They really succeeded. And if there's any victory, then I think it's at the level of our minds. Because you can buy a house any area you want to go to now. But if you haven't shifted here and you haven't done work here, then the outside stuff doesn't really make a difference. So yeah, sadly, it worked. Very sadly, it worked.
Apartheid, for me, or even for us black people, it taught us something that it have never taught the white people. It taught us patience, and it taught us hope. We had a hope to say one day we'll be free. And having that hope, and we were patient to wait for that hope to come, for that dream to come true.
What is apartheid? It's a representation of what's going on around the world, in every part of the world, between humans. There is the feeling of separation, and that's what apartheid means to be apart, not to be together.
Your perfume la, di, your la la, di, your grassy, di, your perfume la, me, open me, do the you of me. I thank you from thine sun, wash, open goes me, if you like, yes.
My name is Stanley Khoza. I live in Durban, in the area called Duzuma, which is one of the black townships within the northern part of Durban.
I'm Vanilla Yoganathan. I'm the assistant editor here at the Mercury. The Mercury is the biggest morning newspaper, English language morning newspaper in KwaZulu-Natal, the province.
My name's Grant Ross. I work for myself as a contractor.
My name is Steve, and I've been living here in the Transkei, as we used to call it, for 20 years now.
My name is Max Magnuson. I'm a division officer employed here in the Durban Fire Department.
My name is Marie Claire. I was born in the Congo, so I'm not South African born, but I came here as a refugee when I was 9 years old.
Okay, well that's going to be a bit difficult. Yeah. My name is Daphne, and I'm a healer and a massage therapist, and I work with animals. I communicate with animals, and I'm a psychic clairvoyant.